Hello tanks and tankettes, and welcome to Patreon Supporter Spotlight 59. This time it's going to be 2 tanks replays followed by 1 from warships, and we're kicking off the tanks action with this T-30 game from Ireland Man, who is using the 155mm gun, which packs an almighty wallop but has rather a long reload to go with it. So this is Steps, and initially it looked like he was going to the 890 line, as most of his team are. But maybe because most of his team are, he's decided to go to the western flank instead. He's turned around because, and you can see the thinking here, there's not a lot there. And so if there's a bunch of enemy tanks that come down that way, there's going to be some serious trouble. Except we're only like a minute in and we can already tell actually most of the enemy team is on the 890 line as well. So if this was me, I think around about now I'd have been reversing my direction and heading back over towards the 890 line, which is good terrain for this machine because it does very, very well hull down. It once upon a time was an American heavy, and it is in the pattern of the T-29 and the T-32. It's a very good hull down machine with a very big gun. Oh, hello Batchat. So then this unexpected thing happens. One of the enemy high tier mediums, well, it's a high tier game, they're all high tiers. One of the enemy medium tanks unexpectedly shows up and basically donates their tank to Ireland Man. Couldn't tell you the logic of that. Anyway, so on this flank, however, it's not looking like there really is much though, is there? It's that Object 257 and maybe a 1390 a lot further back. And yet the IS-4 and the T-54E1 are not trying to push forwards at all, and it's actually up to Ireland Man to maybe get things moving a bit, which is not really ideal. We also have to give a shout out to that Type 4 Heavy, who has decided also to come all the way over to this flank in defiance of all the information we have at this point. And it's a slow machine, so it's taken them a while to get here, and it's a machine that really would be useful on the other flank right now. We're already down 2 tier 9 heavies, and it's looking like a couple of tanks that had advanced are getting completely surrounded and overwhelmed. And so in retrospect, not going to the other flank is seeming like a really bad decision right now, both for the Type 4 Heavy and for Ireland Man, in fact. So a nice easy shot on that commander's hatch at a very close range and bounces the return fire. His allies here have finally realised that, hey, maybe we outnumber this one single tank and maybe we should drive forwards and deal with it. But it really did take Ireland Man taking the lead there for anything to actually happen. Meanwhile, the other flank is collapsing at a rate of knots, and so this is not looking so good at this point. Ireland Man initially looks like he might go north. The T-54E1 and the Type 4 do, but potentially they'd have been better coming across to this position as well. But defending either cap from a concerted push from the 890 line, it's really difficult on that map. It's why, on this map rather, it's why that eastern flank is so important. However, there's a good chance that he can get in a decent amount of damage before he does go down, and because he's firing out of range at the moment, he's got time to work with this long reload. There are certainly many instances you'll come across playing this tank when the 120mm would actually be more useful. This thing makes people cautious, this 155mm gun, but sometimes people will mistake the 120mm for the 155, and they'll come in and they'll think, oh, okay, they've just fired, I'm gonna steam in and, you know, empty my autoloader into their very weak hull armor, whilst they've got this, what was it, like 17 seconds base reload? Except if you have the 120mm, it's a rather faster reload than that, and you can catch people unawares sometimes. So it's one of those things where, or one of those machines where actually it's got a viable choice of guns depending on how you want to play it. So there's not a lot of their own team left at this point. The 54E1 died, and the Type 4 Heavy is possibly not going to do that well, but Ireland Man's picking off a fair few tanks himself. He's now got 4 kills, although some of them were low-ish health. But, you know, lowish health for 750 Alpha is, you know, on a different scale than lowish health for, say, 390 Alpha. It's not quite the same thing, but still, this is a bit of an uphill fight. If this is to be doable, then basically he's going to be needing to keep firing that gun as much as possible. And now that the Type 4 Heavy's dead, suddenly that northern flank is completely open, and he's going to have to worry about taking fire from not just the east but the north as well. And the IS-7's not going to take that long to get there. It's not a slow machine. The Jaegeru, however, will take a little bit longer. In fact, there is the IS-7. So he takes a hit himself, gets the shot in. It's about an average roll, so not enough to kill this IS-7, and now he has that reload to deal with. But the IS-7's not just going for it. They maybe could have gotten in another shot, but maybe they... Well, I was going to say maybe they don't know what gun he has. No, he just shot them. They know exactly what gun he has. But as it is, they basically gave Island Man the space to reload, and although he has taken another hit, it, you know, was the death of the IS-7 when really they could have gotten in another hit and then possibly even killed Island Man before he was able to kill them. It's now, however, not looking so good with this Jaegeru, who is able to take the hit, just goes for it. Island Man does get that last bit of damage, but the Jaegeru just plows in, eats the shell and gets the kill. So it's now down to just this IS-4, who is slightly surrounded. And I think it's no spoiler at this point to say that, yeah, this one's going to be a loss. There will be no last-minute miracle from this IS-4. So if we take anything away from this replay, it's the importance of paying attention to the minimap and the importance of knowing which flanks are the more important on which maps. And also not just sitting there passively by with 4 tanks versus 1 tank, which, you know, we can certainly... Well, not that Island Man was sitting passively by, but the IS-4, the 54E1, and that Type 4 Heavy that took so long to come trundling over. Yeah, those were all players that could have done better, but yet still not the worst players on this team. And it was a close thing. If Island Man had been on that other flank himself, on the eastern side, and 1 or 2 other players had been a bit better, had maybe overextended a little less, this could have been a win. So yeah, this is one where just 1 or 2 actions, 1 or 2 players' actions could potentially have really changed it. But as it was still an ace tanker on a loss, which is not a bad result at all. And so Island Man at least got to take something away from it, which is more than some of his teammates can say. Next up, we have another Tier 9 machine, this time the Object 430, being driven by Manti 111 here, who apparently has a grudge against all fences, or maybe he's just enjoying the new Havoc physics. Anyway, so this machine, I honestly couldn't tell you that much about offhand. I know very little about the high-tier Soviet mediums overall, and this one, like the most I can say is it probably got poor gun depression and it probably has good turret armor. Although I think this might be one of the ones that has a squashy turret roof, because there are some of them that do, and so they're vulnerable to, was it like 122mm and up. And of course at this tier there are plenty of guns that meet that requirement. But otherwise, decent mobility, fairly decent gun handling, and just all round, you know, it's a Soviet medium. So this is, of course, HD Lakeville. I don't think I've played on this yet myself, but I am pretty sure that this is one of those ones that really hasn't changed much, that it's basically just an HD version of the previous map without any kind of tweaks. So everything is pretty much as expected, including the, of course, gaggle of heavy tanks, in fact all of their heavy tanks, who have gone to the valley. And probably the least appropriate of those was the 5100 who just died. That's a really terrible place for a 5100 to be. You have to sit and expose your tank for so long to get any shots off with that auto-loader. You don't have any armor, you don't really have gun depression, and you have to expose yourself to unload the clip. So yeah, it's not a surprise that they were among the first to die, especially as there is also artillery in play. Of the tanks here in town, the Object 257 is probably the most problematic. The rest of them, well, it's another 5100, an IS-2 and a T-29, and you know, if they hit him in the hull, I think all of those things could pen him. But the only thing he's maybe going to have difficulty penning back is the Object 257. And even then, it really depends on their angling. So he goes for the hit into the side of the beak, and actually does pen and gets another one. So that was a worthwhile trade. I mean, he took a hit himself, but getting 2 hits off in return and leaving the guy with a 1 shot. Yeah, that was a good use of hit points, I would say. So it was maybe a slightly awkward approach, but it did work out. The M103 behind him, I think, has taken a fair bit of damage at this point. Having said all of the heavies, no, the M103 was here. It was just most of the heavies that went to the valley. So that just leaves really Manti and I think the STA with any appreciable amount of health. And the STA maybe not so much at this point, because they've just run in and decided to try and finish off that Object 257. And they provided quite a nice distraction doing it, and actually also got the kill on IS-2. But unfortunately have managed to not survive that Su-101. The 5100 is still very much alive and kicking and with a lot of health, but fortunately for Manti, and clearly, you know, I mean, they bounced 1 shell, they've presumably got 5 more behind it if they've got a full clip. Well, actually, no, it won't be 5 at this point because they did just finish off the M103. But they are just steadily taking damage in getting to Manti, presumably either the M103 or one of the tank destroyers hit him in the process, and thanks to a turret bounce there as well, Manti's actually survived, although theoretically with a low damage roll he still could have survived a penning hit, but as it was, he has emerged the only survivor of all the tanks that came to the village. So what's left? Well, there's the Type 4 Heavy who pressed through the town, who's just died, or pressed through the valley rather, who's just died. There are a pair of tank destroyers trying to hold the end of the 4 line, and then there's artillery and a Leo. That Leo hasn't really moved much from the A line, have they? No. Yeah, so for most of this game they've effectively been 14 versus 15 because that Leo has done nothing, and it's not an AFK player, it's somebody that's just gone and sat behind a building and done nothing and hoped that their team would win for them. So yeah, they're effectively a player down right now. So we're going to speed this up a little bit as Manti makes the approach back to the base. Trying to push the enemy cap on his own with this health would be a little bit crazy, and as it is, the enemy team is making a concerted push towards their own base, so yeah, he's basically going to have to get back there and help. And this is actually good terrain for this tank. He can stay hull down and still get shots off, and the main worry is in fact going to be artillery, although as you can see the Stridswagen actually whizzed down and might get some shots off from behind and might maybe find the artillery. It really depends where the artillery has gone. Their own arty had enough presence of mind to move as well, so they do still have artillery support. This Leo is not doing much of anything. So they're trying to cap, but it's not that much of a worry in terms of time. And because Manti is in a position where he can reset, and because, as it turned out, the GW Panther was in the valley, he wasn't actually at any point, well, for this latter part of the game anyway, he wasn't at risk from being hit by that artillery, because he is low enough health that a direct arty hit could potentially finish him off at this point. However, the S1 did die to the Lerva as well, so it's pretty much just down to Manti and artillery, because this Leo is Leo's doing nothing but really I don't know, sitting behind a building and going, "You can do it, you guys! I believe in you." This Leo right now is the bard of the party, except not even really that, because they're not trying to encourage or do anything useful. I think they've traded some ineffective fire with that WZ-111, but all they've really done is lose some health. So it's the artillery that gets the kill, and that just leaves this Comet left. And I think at this point, in contrast to the previous game, where it was a close game but a loss, this time it's going to be a close game but a win. It's extremely unlikely the Comet will finish him off. In fact, that looks like the stock Comet turret as well. That's the Cromwell turret. So there's a very good chance that he can just bounce any shells that this guy fires at him. Even with the, I believe, somewhat relatively weak frontal armour that this tank has. So he's dazed from the artillery, and that makes getting the final shot very easy indeed. And there we go, there's the final kill for the top gun. And victory. And I think we can say Manti kind of carried that one. It was an ace tanker, unsurprisingly, but 6.5k thousand damage, yes, and another 1.1k, nearly 1.2k, and a high caliber to go with that top gun as well. So that was a very good performance. And it was actually artillery that came second in the team, both in terms of damage done and XP. Yeah, some of his team were really not very impressive. That Leo managed a grand total of 1 penning hit of damage. Still did better XP-wise somehow than a bunch of his teammates. Although being further up the team list than that 5100 is perhaps not surprising. But yeah, overall, I think we can call that one a carry. Very definitely. Lastly, we come to our warships game, and it's one of the new French battleships, in fact, as driven by Fog Battleship North Carolina. It's a Tier 7 game, but, well, not much of a Tier 7 game. There's one Tier 7 battleship per team, and everybody else is Tier 6 or Tier 5. So that's pretty good for this machine. The armour isn't that great on the Normandy, and it's also got a bit of an awkward turret arrangement. You do have 12 of those 340mm guns, which is pretty decent, but getting the full broadside means showing quite a lot of your side armour, and so there are a lot of times when actually you've only got 4 or maybe 8 guns available. And because they're 340mm, which is what you get on the French battleship line from Tier 5 to Tier 7, they're actually smaller than I think any of the other battleship guns at this tier, apart from, having said that, is that true? Maybe the Dunkirk is smaller. I think Dunkirk actually might be smaller. And of course, theoretically, well, there's the Graf Spee, there's one right there. That's got battleship guns, it's just on a cruiser, and those are 11-inch guns. So you could argue the toss on that one, and I think actually I might be wrong just in that the Dunkirk is, what, 13-inch guns? And these are 13.5, something like that, if memory serves me correctly. But it's still a fairly small caliber of battleship gun for this tier. It more relies on just having quite a lot of them. And as I've said, that turret arrangement does sometimes make using them all quite awkward. In other regards, it's a fairly nice ship though. I mean, the AA is terrible. It's really bad. It's one of the serious failings of this machine. But to go along with that, it has really nice maneuverability. It is quite fast, and it's got a very good turning radius. In fact, it's as maneuverable as some of the Americans. It's not a hallmark of the French battleships all the way down the line, but it's certainly true of some of them, that they do handle in the water very well, which makes avoiding torpedoes, for instance, or trying to turn into an airdrop that bit easier. So at the moment he's basically just giving lots of broadside and shooting at enemy ships that are giving lots of broadside, and you can kind of get away with it to some extent. You'll notice if you look down at the bottom left, he's trying to give as much angle as he can get away with in order to use all of his guns for the most part. And I'm presuming that's because he's got in mind that he's going to use because he's got the captain's seal that tells him if anyone's actually aiming at him. He's going to be relying on that maneuverability to turn either in or away as appropriate if somebody does start seriously aiming at him and firing at him, which it looks like somebody is at this point. Somebody's definitely got him very solidly targeted at this point. So a nice citadel on that, what was it, the October Revolution. So that's up to 31k, nearly 32k already. It's got lots of nice broadside enemies to shoot at this point, which is certainly a lot more attractive than that bow on Colorado, for example. There's not a lot of enemy cruisers though, so he's got more battleships to worry about in terms of angles that he could potentially be exposing his armour to than, say, things that are going to be spamming him with HE. Although having said that, there still could be battleships firing a lot of HE. And although I don't think there are any British battleships on the enemy team, that doesn't stop some people. Some people fire just exclusively HE regardless of which battleship they're in, whether it makes any sense or not. And talking of, well, that was HE from something fairly far away, so yeah, that is at least one enemy battleship that is just firing HE. So he's pulled a turn to bring his guns to bear on the other side of the map, and you can see this thing does have a fairly decent range. He's assuming the Kirov's going to be going forwards and adjusts accordingly, and it looks like these should find their mark, but as it is, no. Unfortunately, they don't. So they've got the mid-cap so far. They are now finally taking the A-cap, although it's taking them a while to have, you know, it has taken them a while to get to that point. But because they're behind on ships, because it has taken them a long time to get moving on the A-cap, they are down on points. So it's not the best situation right now. And Battleship, or Fog, or I don't know what to call him exactly, he's put himself in a bit of an awkward position in terms of he's obviously thinking to try and defend this cap somewhat, but he gave a bit too much angle to a few too many people there, and so he's bled more health than he really had to at that point. Anyway, this Cesare's, or is it Cesare? I never know with this ship. The old JC, the Julius Caesar, that's an awfully attractive target right now. That's a dangerous tier 5 battleship, and if you can take that out, that is definitely going to help their team. There's a Colorado back there within range as well, though, and the Graf Spee, you can't afford to completely ignore that ship. I mean, it does have very, very good torp launching angles, and it's actually a favourite of mine. It's very awkward to play sometimes, but there are other times when it absolutely, you know, people underestimate it and it performs very, very well. Just the fact that it has a heel on a tier 6 cruiser is very useful sometimes. So once again, his angling was not optimal there. He got a bit lucky against that Julius Caesar. I'm just calling it the Julius Caesar. It's much easier than fumbling the whatever the actual pronunciation is. So yeah, he took a little bit of damage, but I think it was mostly overpens, or maybe the other ship missed most of the shots they were going for. I don't know, but it seems like he could have come out of that a lot worse than he did. So there's the Graf Spee, well within torp range. He's going to have to be aware of that. And he actually gets a little bit unlucky there. 7 overpens. There's still a decent chunk of damage out of a cruiser, but 7 overpens. Yeah, French battleship guns are not the most reliable. So there's a fire from whatever's firing HE from that direction. Whatever it is, it was a fair few shells there. And he's just going to let this one burn because he does still have a decent amount of health. He's also putting some speed on as well. And there we go. That's more like it. At that range, broadside cruiser, you would hope to get more that kind of a result. So he's turning more north. He's only got the one thing targeting him at the moment. So although, tactically speaking, it's not the best place and time to show broadside to that many enemy ships, the maneuverability coupled with the information that he's got means that at that point it was a risk worth taking, and he gets away with it. Unfortunately, he's unable, however, to kill off that Kirov, which would be a nice thing to take care of. It's got dangerous guns. It's not a particularly survivable ship, but it does have dangerous guns. But as it is, it looks like he's managed to get himself to cover. So instead, let's go for some of these battleships. And, well, we know what's been firing all that HE at him. It's that New Mexico. And that New Mexico seems to have been firing HE the entire game, just regardless of what they're shooting at, what the angling is like. Just full HE. It's not really the best way to play a battleship. Anyway, so never mind. But as they're giving a nice broadside in return, and as we know, they are firing just all of the HE, and that's the ship that's targeting Fog right now. He can just comfortably maneuver back towards it, although clearly not the happiest with that salvo, given that the guy was absolutely the New Mexico was absolutely playing badly there. It's the nature of battleships. Sometimes the RNG just goes nope. So shots out on the Colorado, and I think he's just kind of ignoring the New Mex at this point as a less of a threat. The Colorado, however, potentially a very nasty ship. And oh, hello, we've also just found out where that remaining enemy destroyer is, the Igla, and maybe the whatever that is, the Texas will avoid torps. We can't actually tell until we get a view of them again, but anyway, if you're wondering why sometimes I don't quite know which ships are where, it's because the preview is a little bit fuzzy. This is one of the reasons why I wanted an upgraded PC, because even with the kind of various bits of pre-processing that you can do with video files, it's still quite an intensive process for your PC to do video editing. So I have to turn down the preview quality so it plays smoothly. I can turn it up so it looks super crisp and crystal clear on the preview window, but then it plays at, like, you know, an inconsistent amount of FPS, and we get FPS drops, or I get FPS drops when I'm watching it, which is really distracting when you're trying to give a smooth flow of commentary. So instead I go with the option that makes things you know, play smoothly but be a bit fuzzy. But hopefully I won't have to once the new PC is all set up. I'm still waiting on the case. That's the only thing that's holding me up at this point. So, with that shot against the New Mex, who had beached himself, that is a high caliber and a Confederate. We're up to well over 100k damage at this point. And it's that kind of a ship. You will occasionally get the high strikes with just having, you know, the sheer number of shells that you can put out. But mostly it's just chipping away and firing and firing and firing and watching the damage rack up. And he's managed 76 hits, which is not half bad. This is where having that high number of guns available becomes useful. But you're going to get more than a few shots like that, even against badly angled enemies. So the Igla's not such a threat anymore. He managed to severely punish that guy who got far too close trying to make a torpedo drop and wasn't then able to speed boost away or have smoke available in time. But it is possible that they hit the Texas with the drop that they did make, because that Texas is now in very, very poor condition, and it's not going to take a lot of focusing down to kill them. But most things seem to be pointing their guns at Fog at the moment. Now they've brought this back on points because they've got the 2 cap points, because the enemy team has gotten what's left of them completely bogged around, bogged down around 1 cap point. They have swung things back in their favour in that regard, but it would still be entirely possible from this point, from the enemy team's point of view, to just kill them all. So this is far from won yet. Having the victory points in their favour is certainly desirable, but this is definitely not won yet. So the Kamikaze makes they've just been buzzing around, dropping torps across the cap. It doesn't look like they're going to get that New Mex, though, who has been playing so poorly. You know, that is your stereotypical, can't even say the word, stereotypical battleship driver right there. So yeah, not that much of a threat, but that's maybe one of the easier things to hit right now. And hey, it's a low health battleship to take out. The Kirov was also getting a bit close, but the friendly Graf Spee, was it? I didn't even see who it was that got that kill properly there, but yeah, they potentially were going for the torpedo rush at the very low health, but they may or may not have made it just based on the secondaries that the Normandy has, which is, you know, they're decent. The good French secondaries don't really kick in until like tier 8, although the Lyon's secondaries aren't bad. So at this point, they're ahead on points. 6 minutes left, 2 enemy ships. And Fog's going to do an unnecessarily risky thing, in my opinion. They could basically sit tight and like have the advantage. The enemy team, those two remaining ships, do still have a pretty good amount of health. Their own New York is quite potentially going to sink. They're pushing out broadside, the Colorado's pounding away at them, and they're basically doing the wrong thing. They should have just stayed in cover essentially, or else tried to group up with their allies. But talking of staying in cover, that's exactly what Fog could have been doing as well, and instead he's engaging this other New Mexico at close range. This New Mex is not firing HE. This New Mex has discovered that AP shells are actually quite good, and because Fog has closed to at such a close range, wow, yeah, that was not nice. That was nasty. In fact, this New Mex might even be going for the ram, but this ship is faster than a New Mexico, so Fog is able to avoid it. However, the turret traverse is not so hot on the Normandy, so he's going to have real difficulty bringing his primary battery around. Anyway, there goes the New York. It's basically just a secondary duel at this point, and that Colorado is going to be bringing his guns round to Fog as well. This was not really a good plan in hindsight, but maybe he'll get away with it? Maybe? Anyway, he's up to over 160k at this point. That was a very nice hit, and ooh, gets quite lucky in that the Colorado's shells are ineffective, but because of this turret arrangement, he's only got the rear turret available at the moment. In fact, that mid turret has to turn all the way around in order to become available for use. So that close bypass, I'm honestly not quite sure what Fog had in mind there, but as it was, he's been quite lucky to get away with this with his life. And as the Texas has also been shooting at this New Mex, as Fog himself has had some decent shots, he's going to come out of it alive, but I think this one was a little bit more down to luck rather than a skillfully chosen engagement. So there we go, he gets the kill on the New Mex. That Texas somehow is hanging on with just a slither of, like, literally hundreds of hit points left. Like a couple of rivets holding the entire ship left, ship together. And so it's these two, oh, that was nasty. It's these two low health ships with not super great armor versus this Colorado with 16-inch guns. So yeah. However, the silver lining is they just need to not die. 934 hit points. They just need to not die. At some point along the way, the kamikaze died as well. I missed where that happened exactly, because there was a little bit of excitement going on at this point. But it really does come down to whether that Colorado... the Texas should just be staying hidden, and instead the Texas has popped out to take shots. Fog at this point is trying to get now more an island between him and the Colorado. But yeah, it really is just like RNG. The Colorado gets lucky, he could end Fog so easily, and it's really only the fact that he's got two targets to shoot at right now, and there goes the Texas, that saved Fog. Although he might still have gotten lucky, he's put a bit of range between the two ships. So, with the Texas going down, they just lost some points, but they're still over 900, and less than 2 minutes to go. But they will hit 900 points before the timer runs out. He just needs to be unspotted and to stay alive. And there we go, over 200,000 damage with that last salvo. So fortunately, he made it. There is that final volley coming in from the Colorado, but that misses quite fortunately. That was a bit of a guess, obviously, and it was actually a fairly decent guess, but not good enough. So it was a good round, it was a very good damage result, but there was a fair bit of luck in there as well, I think it's fair to say. However, Dreadnought, High Caliber and Confederate in a Tier 6 battleship in a Tier 7 game, nearly 2,500 base XP, that was all pretty good. And a shout out to that Texas as well, they did really quite well, all things considered, especially considering how little health they had for most of the latter part of that game. They somehow managed to get away with it. So, you can see the results there. Yeah, basically almost all AP. got a bit of damage out the secondaries. 10k from the fires set, that would all have been against that New Mexico. So it's got a good range of secondaries, this. It's got a good spread, but if you're speccing purely into the secondaries, it does come at the cost of your main battery accuracy, of course, so it's not really particularly recommended. So there we go, the Normandy, which I kind of like. The guns are a bit awkward to use, but just the handling of it, it's very nice for a battleship, and it does make up quite well for some of the other deficiencies. Although if you see a carrier on the enemy team, you might be in for a rough time. So that's it for this group of Patreon supporter replays. Hopefully you have enjoyed this video, and if you have, you can leave any comments below, you can hit the like button, you can sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.